The familiar smell of homemade food spread through the room as the laughter of relatives filled the air. It was yet another one of those family gatherings where everyone pretends to be happy and united, even with the small dramas and unspoken secrets hanging in the air. I was leaning against the kitchen counter, holding a glass of wine when I felt his presence approaching. "Are you having fun?" Lucas's hoarse voice sounded beside me, soft, almost like a whisper, but carrying a tone that made my skin tingle. I diverted my gaze from the glass and stared at his face, the same face that had been tormenting me in recent nights. The way he smiled slyly, as if he knew exactly what I was thinking, made me uneasy. It wasn't the first time he had provoked this reaction in me, but that night something seemed different. There was a greater danger there. "Not really," I replied, trying to maintain composure, but my voice came out quieter than I expected. The tension in the air enveloped me so completely that my mind was torn between desire and the fear of being caught. Lucas got closer, pressing his shoulder against mine, and I could feel the heat of his body against mine. The subtle touch seemed to burn my skin beneath the thin fabric of the red dress I had chosen to wear that night, as if he knew exactly where he was hitting me. "Nice dress," he commented, his gaze slowly descending my body without haste. "Almost inappropriate for a family gathering, don't you think?" "Maybe," I retorted, trying to sound indifferent. But inside, my heart raced and I felt a growing warmth on my skin. I felt vulnerable, but also overwhelmed by a strange and forbidden adrenaline. Before I could say anything else, my aunt called everyone to the living room. It was time for one of those traditional games we always played during gatherings. I made my way toward the living room, feeling Lucas's gaze drilled into my back. He was close enough to make me feel as though something existed between us, even without words. We sat in a circle on the floor, surrounded by cousins, uncles, and grandparents. Laughter echoed as each person told funny stories or recalled old moments. I could barely pay attention. I could feel Lucas sitting too close, his leg brushing against mine from time to time. It was an almost innocent contact, but it left me unsettled, and with each touch my body responded, eager. At one point, I felt his hand lightly touch my knee beneath the table. Quick but intentional touch. I glanced at him, but Lucas only kept a casual smile, as if nothing had happened. My whole body seemed to respond to the simple gesture, and I hated myself for it, feeling the heat rise to my neck. "Want more wine?" he asked, leaning close to me, his voice low just for me to hear, but with a tone that challenged me to resist. I nodded, unable to form a coherent response. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, feeling my breath quicken. It didn't take long for him to appear right behind me. "You're tense," he commented, leaning against the counter beside me, his body closer than I wanted. "And you know exactly why," I snapped, crossing my arms, trying to hide the tension that was starting to take over my body. Lucas laughed, a low, hoarse sound that made me shiver. He got closer, this time more than before. His hand lightly touched my hip, slowly climbing up to my waist. His fingers traced slow paths, as if he were testing the limits of my control. "Don't you think this is dangerous?" I murmured, feeling his warm breath against my skin, while my body seemed to respond involuntarily. "Isn't that exactly what makes it so interesting?" he retorted, his fingers tracing a smooth path along the side of my body, as if each movement were a silent invitation. Kitchen door was slightly open, and anyone could see us. The risk of being caught made everything even more intense. He leaned in more, his lips lightly brushing against the exposed skin of my shoulder. The sensation of his touches was so real that I could feel the shiver running down my spine. "Someone could walk in," I protested, but my voice came out low and unconvincing, as if desire was stopping me from reacting. "Then don't make a sound," he replied, with a mischievous smile that made my heart race even more. Before I could react, I felt his lips touch my neck, soft at first, then firmer. One of his hands slid down to my thigh, gliding across the bare skin with an intimacy that left me breathless. The sensation was so intense that I wondered why I was still trying to resist. The sound of footsteps coming toward the kitchen made us break apart abruptly. My heart was pounding as I straightened my dress and pretended to examine the contents of my wine glass. My aunt walked into the kitchen, smiling casually. "Everything okay in here?" she asked, while grabbing a dish from the counter. "Yes, we were just getting more wine," I quickly replied, with a voice firmer than I felt inside, trying to disguise the adrenaline still rushing through my veins. Lucas remained silent, but I could feel his gaze still fixed on me, as if he knew that every breath I took was marked by the intensity of what had just happened. As soon as my aunt left, he approached again, but this time he kept a safer distance, as if the game between us had been interrupted but not finished. "Looks like we'll have to be more careful," he whispered with that same sly smile that made my mind spin. The night continued with a constant tension between us. Every accidental touch, every stolen glance during dinner made me more nervous. The feeling that we were playing with fire made everything even more irresistible. The light of the bonfire reflected on our faces, as if we were on the edge of a cliff, ready to throw ourselves headfirst. After dinner, some of the cousins suggested we go to the backyard to continue the conversation around the bonfire my grandfather always set up for these occasions. I seized the opportunity to step away and take a deep breath, trying to regain control of myself. Lucas, of course, didn't take long to follow me. "Running away from me?" he asked, stopping beside me near the bonfire, where the light of the flames cast soft shadows on our faces. "Trying not to do anything stupid," I retorted with a forced smile, knowing it was just another lie to convince myself. He leaned in, dangerously close again, and the tension between us seemed to grow with every second. "I'd say we've already done a few," he murmured, his voice low and full of insinuation, as if every word were a provocation. I felt his fingers lightly brush my hand, almost like a silent invitation. I looked around, making sure no one was paying attention to us, before I briefly interlaced my fingers with his. Touch was quick, but full of meaning. My body responded uncontrollably, as if it already knew that the line between right and wrong was more blurred than I wanted to admit. "You're unbearable," I murmured, trying to hold back a smile, but knowing that his provocation was pulling me in more than I could have imagined. Lucas only laughed, pleased with the reaction he was provoking in me. He knew he had me, that every gesture of his made me want more. Later, when most of the relatives had already left and the house was starting to empty, I went to the hallway to grab my coat. Lucas appeared right behind, taking advantage of the lack of witnesses to get even closer. "I thought you'd say goodbye to me properly," he teased, with that tone that made my legs tremble. "I don't remember us planning anything," I retorted, trying to sound defiant, but my words came out weak in the face of the desire building between us. He leaned in, holding my waist firmly and pulling me against him. His lips were mere centimeters from mine, and the tension between us was almost palpable. I could feel the heat of his body and the perfume that seemed to intoxicate me even more. "Good thing I'm here to remind you then," he whispered before finally pressing his lips to mine. It was an intense, urgent kiss, as if all the time we had spent flirting had culminated in that exact moment. His hands slid down my back, squeezing my skin through the thin fabric of my dress. My fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, as if I didn't want any distance between us anymore. The distant sound of a door opening made us quickly pull apart, our hearts racing and our breaths shallow. I looked around, making sure no one was nearby. "You love living dangerously, don't you?" I asked, still trying to catch my breath, knowing that what we had done had been risky and exciting. Lucas smiled, his eyes sparkling with a mixture of amusement and desire. "Only when it's worth it," he replied before taking a step back and disappearing down the hallway. I stood there for a few moments, trying to process everything that had happened. I knew it was risky, forbidden, but the adrenaline coursing through my veins made me want more. The desire to relive those moments consumed me, and I knew it wouldn't be the last time. That night, as I lay in bed, Lucas's taste still on my lips and the memory of his touches etched into my skin, I could only think of one thing: this was far from over. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and share it with someone you think would love to hear it too. Your engagement is essential for us to keep bringing more content like this. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. Thank you for watching and see you next time.